I'm John Batchelor. Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host, is here, and we're very pleased to have Robert Costa of the Washington Post to report on the Republican field. And with Mr. Weigel, Bob's colleague at the Post, they wrote an exit piece for Senator Lindsey Graham that was surprising in that it was the foreign policy that the Republican Party is voicing about the foreign policy threats in Mesopotamia, in the Baltics, in the Black Sea Basin, anticipating the next election. You fight the last war always. Senator Graham is looking forward. And Bob, is Senator Graham someone who's going to be an advisor to campaigns? His foreign policy looks in line with the rest of the parties, but not necessarily for all the candidates.
That's right, John. I think when you look at the mainstream Republican hawks in the race, those who are focused on New Hampshire and South Carolina, states with veterans who have traditionally gone to a Republican who supports a muscular foreign policy, Graham is going to be a force. His endorsement will be sought. He is someone who's talked about ground troops and taking on the Islamic State for months, if not years, in a focused way. And I think Marco Rubio, Governor Bush, Governor Kasich, they're all having echoes of Graham in their own stump speeches at the moment.
I think Robert is exactly right. I mean, it's so interesting to me. Lindsey Graham, who's a good friend, in fact, I had him on radio Saturday. In my judgment, he had the strongest, most consistent, coherent message on national security overall, including ISIS and the war and Iran and so forth. And my only regret here, I mean, I don't think Lindsey had much of a shot, but my regret is that he won't be in the debates and people won't get to hear his message. In fact, my regret throughout this is that being in the undercard debate, not enough people watching heard his message, which was really, really coherent. Now, I don't know whether he will endorse. Perhaps Robert has some insight into that. But I can tell you this. He very much favors Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and Chris Christie on foreign policy. He's very much opposed to Donald Trump and Ted Cruz on foreign policy. And those are, I guess, the two frontrunners right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. But Lindsey will speak out. John McCain will also speak out. You know, neither of those fellows are very popular with the conservative wing of the party. But I've always felt they have great national security message. And I sure hope the Republicans don't go soft on me right now, including the issue of more troops on the ground in Syria and Iraq, and the other issue of an absolute war resolution from the U.S. Congress, not to speak of NATO, John. I don't want the Republicans to go wussy on me here.
It's perhaps a coincidence that Senator Graham's from South Carolina. Now, let me think. South Carolina, why is that important? Why is that important? Bob, does Senator Graham have something that to influence the decision in South Carolina after we get through the Iowa and New Hampshire? Is that an ambush that can hurt the wrong candidate?
Potentially. One of the reasons Graham got out of the race, according to his advisors, was he didn't want to be on the ballot and risk an embarrassment to his own political career. He was polling in the single digits in his own state. So his endorsement perhaps wouldn't really give anyone a huge boost, but he has a ground operation there from his Senate campaigns, and he also has a financial network in South Carolina that should he align with a certain candidate, it would certainly have an effect.
And that candidate in South Carolina, would that also be Senator Rubio and Governor Bush, or would Senator Graham wait until after the results of New Hampshire?
Well, one of the other people to mention in that mainstream Republican hawk group would be New Jersey Governor Christie.
Right.
Because Christie's rise in New Hampshire has taken a lot of people's attention here in Washington, the donor class, the political leadership, and they believe that if Christie could come and win New Hampshire in an upset or come in a strong second, maybe some of that establishment support, the Hawks support, it stays on the sidelines to see how New Hampshire pans out, because let's say if Rubio doesn't do as well as expected in Iowa and New Hampshire, someone else, a Kasich, a Christie, even a Bush, could have some more buzz going into South Carolina.
Larry, here's what I like about that. We've had nothing but surprises so far in the presidential race. Why should it change?
Well, that's right. Look, in talking to Lindsey Graham in recent weeks, I mean, Robert is right. He is talking about Chris Christie. Christie is in his group of people that have the story right regarding the ISIS war and so forth. And I talked to him about another issue, and that is Obama's failure to bomb ISIS oil facilities and the oil trucks. How crazy is that? It's their biggest source of revenue, and they're not bombing them because they're worried the truck drivers might get hurt. Of course, the truck drivers are for ISIS in the first place, and they're worried about global warming. Now, we started to bomb, but Lindsey's a guy who flagged that way, way before anybody else did. Now it's starting to come on the radar. This is something the GOP should hammer on this. And I guess they will. I suppose they will. But again, Lindsey Graham's voice needs to be heard. That's what I want to say. He's a national security guy. And if you're looking for a surprise, and Robert, I don't know whether you've covered this or not, Donald Trump is evolving into a hawk. He is. In his own Trumpian way, he is evolving into a hawk. And we're going to hear more about that as we approach the primaries. The guy who really sounds like the isolationist, is not Rand Paul. It's Ted Cruz. He is so disorganized and ambiguous and lawyerly and jumping around on all these issues. It makes no sense at all. And I just wonder if whoever, Trump or Rubio or Bush, sticks it to Cruz on the war, Cruz is going to have a problem there. He's going to have a big problem. Maybe it'll be Christie that sticks it to him.
And Bob, that's Larry, very sharp detail here. I had missed that fact that because I assume that Cruz is prepared in everything, it's odd that he hasn't focused on one message for foreign policy. Bob, have you heard complaints about this?
Cruz, ever since he got to the Senate, has tried to straddle between the Ron Paul wing of the Republican Party and the McCain wing. He's actually explicitly said he puts himself in the center of those two wings. Cruz thought he could get some of that Rand Paul vote by taking a Rand Paul-esque position on national security, especially when it comes to intelligence gathering by the NSA, and appealing to the more millennial Republicans who raise that as a significant concern for them. At the same time, he talks about carpet bombing the Islamic State. I think Larry's right. Objectively, as a reporter, Cruz has been more muddled. And Trump himself, whether he becomes more hawkish or not, it depends on how you define hawkish. In terms of rhetoric, Trump is as hawkish or more hawkish than anyone in the field, but he still remains at his core someone who's inclined toward not intervening abroad and to letting others settle their
Larry, I think you've identified a weakness in Senator Cruz.
I just want to add to this.
We have 20 seconds, Larry. Go ahead.
The idea of carpet bombing is completely and utterly wrong. That is not the way we're going to defeat ISIS in Syria and Iraq. He's got the story wrong. Rubio has already nailed him for it. Watch for others to do likewise.
We thank Robert Costa, Bob Costa, The Washington Post. Merry Christmas, Bob. Thanks for helping. And Larry Kudlow, CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the Weekend. I'm John Batchelor.